Welcome, friends.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and kick things off. My name is Ann Parmeter, and I am working with Focus. This is an online application to help you achieve your long term goals. Today's guest is Alice Livermore, who is going to be speaking with us on the very popular and relevant topic of burnout and how this topic came to be. In a recent focus webinar, people brought up that burnout was a topic that they wanted to hear more about. And coincidentally, on the same day, I saw a post on Alice's LinkedIn on the topic of burnout. So I wonder, Alice, if you can kick it off from there and tell us about your experience with burnout in this infamous LinkedIn post.
Yes. So I decided to share my own experience with burnout because as I was kind of going through it and working my own way out of burnout, I started getting really curious about the topic. And it's something we hear about all the time, but it's always in like a theoretical way, right? There's always some distance between it. And so I think if it's something that we're actually going to fix and pay attention to, we need real life stories of what people have experienced. So I felt like that it was necessary to share it because it's something that a lot of us have dealt with. And it was also an opportunity to open it up for discussion. Through that post, I received a lot of feedback both publicly and a lot of private messages of how it impacted people, what they thought, and people sharing their own stories. And so I see it as like a way moving forward that we all need to talk about what our own experiences are.
Awesome. Okay, Alice, take it away.
Sure. So I put together a little presentation here just to help everybody kind of like follow along with my thought process on it. And as we get started, I just want to ask everybody to really put on like this hat of curiosity about burnout because it's something that is so impactful. I feel like it's easy to kind of bring up feelings of blame or shame. And if we could just put those to the side and really question and like look at it from a little bit of a distance. So when I first started looking at burnout, I tried to figure out like, well, okay, what is it, right? And it was World Health Organization classifies it as an occupational phenomena, and it's feelings of emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. What is a phenomena? So I looked that up, and it's really just something that's observable. So I don't think it really answered the question. So I started to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, what is this phenomena? And if it's emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy, what's underneath that? So I created this word cloud of things that, I guess, feelings that you get with burnout. So it affects physical, emotional, mental, and your social way of being in the world. So burnout encompasses a lot. It encompasses depression, isolation, anxiety, dizziness. I mean, there's just like so much here of what burnout actually is. Um, and as I started kind of like looking at these and thinking about it, I'm like, okay, cool. It's COVID, right? Like we're all going through COVID. It must be COVID related. Um, it's all kind of feels like it's the same kind of stuff that we're all experiencing. So I did a little bit more research and I decided to look at who's really affected by this. And I found this amazing chart. And it's the percentage of US employees who had feelings of burnout pre-COVID versus February 2021, broken up by generation. So this was really alarming to me because if we look at it's broken out by Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And like, that's a lot of people. And those are really high percentages. Some of the research is showing now it takes anywhere from 11 weeks to 2 years to recover from burnout. So this is a large percentage of our population that is experiencing these feelings at any one time. And now on this chart here, the light blue is pre-COVID and the dark blue is post-COVID. So everyone, the chat feature's up. So if you want to like chat as we're going through this, more than welcome. But what do you notice about the light blue versus the dark blue? So pre-COVID versus post-COVID, or like in COVID times? No one's answering, but right, it's not that different, right?
Not a big difference.
Like it's very similar. So yeah, younger people are more impacted by burnout, and it's not that different. So it's actually not COVID that's causing burnout. This is something that has been going on. And while I guess COVID has kind of raised this conversation about mental health, this has been an ongoing problem. So it's not just COVID. So I did a very mathematical display to show you guys what this might look like. So this is 12 people. Imagine this is your work team, right? And what if the symptoms of burnout manifest themselves differently? So things like anxiety and depression are invisible, right? It's not something that we see. So what if burnout was visible, right? And we take those percentages of people that are suffering it and make it a visible thing. What if it was broken arms, right? And instead of having these invisible feelings, if you had burnout, you had broken arms. That would be a lot of people that are walking around with broken arms.
So these folks are smiling. They seem to be thrilled about it.
I mean, aren't we all smiling though, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of people have burnout. We're going to work every day, like everything's fine. You couldn't high five if you had broken arms. You probably couldn't even type. And it would probably be really annoying. Yeah, so fake smiles, that's exactly it. So just thinking about like what would it look like if it were different? So that caused me to look at what are the causes of burnout. So I made this little chart here of things that cause burnout. Things like unfair treatment, the amount of work that you're doing, unclear expectations. And when you think about what is the common cure to burnout, it's looking at an individual, right? And we all hear this thing like, you're feeling burnt out, go do some self-care. That's actually not how you get out of burnout at all. And self-care should not be used as a like stopgap measure to help yourself from falling into depression, right? Self-care is great. It's something you should do when you're feeling bad or good, but it's not the answer to burnout. And what's interesting is if you look at the causes of burnout, and now I went back to that slide, and I played a little bingo game. So I put a stamp to show all of those causes that are caused by the individual and what's caused by our systems. And if you could guess, all of these things that cause burnout are system problems. They're not people problems. So what needs to change here? So everybody, you're invited to vote in the chat. Is it the individual, or is it the system, or some combination? Fix the system. Yes. Scarce rewards. Thank you, Simon. There may be a few spelling errors on here, but I did my best. Yes. So if you put A, you get a point. If you put B, you get a point. And if you put A and B, you also get a point. We're not really counting points here today, but yeah, so it's both, right? So individually, we can increase our resilience. Resilience is a teachable and buildable skill set. And it's something that we as individuals can work on. But at the same time, if we are making ourselves healthy to be thrown back into a system that harms your, that doesn't support psychological safety, we're going to just have the same outcome. So it's both things kind of in tandem that need to be improved. So then how do we go about fixing it? And I'm excited to have a lot of people on the line today to kind of help suss this out a little bit. But if we look at this concept of idea technology, it's an idea by Dr. Barry Schwartz, and it's the concept that if we have something like a cell phone, right, in 5 years, my cell phone's going to be obsolete and I'm going to get a new one, but we don't do that as quickly with ideas, right? When we kind of have a basis for how things should go, we're not as quick to change it as we would to be throwing out a device or something like that. So I came up with this idea of connect, doing, and engaging, right? Because if you are somebody who's suffering from burnout, self-care and like being by yourself is not going to help. You need to connect with other people. You need to re-engage. And I will never tell you if you're suffering from burnout to follow your passion. I feel like I can just imagine somebody like drowning and trying to get water. And I'm like, well, just run. Like you can get right out of the water. It's not going to help, right? Try anything. Like if you do anything with the intent of like, this might make me better, it might. And if you try things that you don't want to do, well, then you learn something about yourself and you know what not to do next time. But it's just getting out there and kind of like re-engaging with life and things that excite you and connecting with people. And then for all of us who know somebody who's affected by burnout, how do we help, right? So how do we check on people, right? What are we doing in our work lives that we can make things better for people, or make sure that systems aren't having this outcome on individuals, and just offering different ways that we can help support people. And then as leaders, leaders need to be asking more questions from their people. I don't know when the last time, I've ever been asked about how my mental well-being is at work, or if I've done a work design survey to see that the system that I'm working in is supportive of my psychological safety. But those are tools that are available now. And, it's not necessarily to blame. This is really a new lens at looking at the health of people and organizations. So as leaders, you can try new things, right? And you can also engage with, there's a lot of people in this space now who are working to help bring well-being back to the workplace and help mitigate these psychological risks. So it's finding people that you can connect with. So one of my questions for the group that we have on today, which I'm kind of feel like burnout isn't a great word for what's happening here. I feel like it's overused and it's kind of used very nonchalant today. Like, oh, I'm just having a little bit of burnout. But what we're looking at is like real psychological strain on a large group of people caused by the systems that we work in. So I'm going to run like an unofficial contest, but if we could all decide a new name, be really creative, throw it in the chat. We'll all just decide that's the new word, and then we'll all start using it. And then that'll be the new word for burnout. I was thinking something, I'll put it in the chat.
I like that, organizational dysfunction. Yeah.
Right? I'm suffering from organizational dysfunction right now.
I mean, I like mine. Mine's the work SADS. I think that's pretty clever, right?
Yes.
Yeah, depletion. Ooh, professional fatigue. These are good.
Mm-hmm.
Alice, I was thinking just a moment earlier on like what we can do. And I think one actionable thing is normalizing by example, like setting an example of having really good boundaries with our work life, which has never been harder than in the last couple of years working remotely. And I think we can change our culture of at least the people we work directly with by being that bold leader in our teams and being like, no, these are my boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I was thinking when I was putting this presentation together, and also through my own experience of talking about my example, my experience with burnout, is that like I think we tend to wait for somebody to take charge, and somebody to speak up. And I don't know if everybody's noticed in the past years, but like there are no adults in the room anymore. There's not. And so we all have to kind of step in and be the adults that we wish were there. And I want to share one really powerful book that kind of helped me find my voice and kind of navigate through this. It's called The Art of Insubordination by Todd Kashdan. And I highly recommend, it's like a must read for everybody. So it's how to defy and dissent effectively. Um, and it's a catchy title, and it definitely will tell you how do we bring about new ideas. But mostly it also looks at how do we listen, right? Because it's going to take people to be bold enough to start these conversations, and start bringing it up, and also to listen, right? This is going to be a two-way street with both organizational leaders and employees. So how do we figure out together what we both need and how to design systems that enhance us all collectively? I'm going to put that title of the book in the chat. Um, but it's a really great read. Yeah, and I'm curious, with everybody that we have in the room here, what's top of mind? Is there anything that people want to ask or share about their own experience, or something that you could walk away from today with?
Yeah, let's open it up. Let's open it up for conversation here.
I've got a quick
I guess,
question.
oh yeah, go ahead, Duncan.
So with remote working, what's the top 3 things organizations can be doing to prevent workout? Bearing in mind we can't control the environment and the amount of socialization that employees are having when they're working from home.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I recently saw somebody who at the bottom of their email, kind of like after their name, they had a little quote or something, and it said like, I understand you may receive this email outside of your normal working hours. Don't worry about responding until you're back in your normal working hours. And I just thought that was so powerful, right? Because we're so apt to like seeing an email come in, wanting to jump, feeling like somebody's waiting on us to answer. And so it's just giving permission of like, hey, I understand that you're working differently. There was another meme that I saw, and it was something like going back to work after like the Christmas holiday or something, and it's like, everybody hold the line, like we have 2 days of this break left, like nobody break and answer. So I think just coming together and recognizing that we all need to give each other permission a little bit, and normalize what's okay and what's not, and like answering emails at midnight, if that's your working hours, great. If it's not, great.
One thing I've noticed, sorry to butt in, one thing I've noticed, especially with working from home, if companies are doing it and, establishing flexible hours, if you as a group can establish like a set of core hours, maybe that's 6 core hours of the day or 4 core hours of the day where you can all agree to share information, share ideas, share all these things, and then you can kind of schedule your other hours outside of that, and then that can give the flexibility. That's typically a really good way of breaking it up, and then you know when you can bug people and when you can't.
I love
Yeah,
that,
that's
Lauren.
awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, I love I love thinking about how I mean, each person matters so much in their workplace, and we all have so much power to make a toxic or a more positive work environment. And we can be really intentional about it. Like, understand that if you're sending an email in the middle of the night, other people are going to look at that as a normalized behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like you know, even talking about this, it's going to be a challenging topic because when we think about people don't like change, right? And so when we really start looking at systems, it's going to take a lot of us being on the same page of like, okay, we're doing this for the greater good. And I can imagine as a business leader, offering a survey to your employees that looks at their work design or looks at their well-being is going to be hard, right? Like you might be afraid of what comes back there, but it's just that's just the start, right? Because you have to kind of know what you're working with and how to assess the situation so that you know the actions to take to move forward.
Question for you that I'm interested in is this culture of immediacy. So in the modern world, there's notifications that are going off every 2 seconds. And I think it's really hard for people to have that ability to just ignore it, or because of lack, FOMO or things like that. How much do you think that plays into burnout? Because if you can't ever wind down your brain because of a notification, how much do you think that affects it? And any good tips for helping people?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick. I think it impacts it a lot, right? We've very quickly as human beings moved from, into a life where we have a lot of technology and have it at our disposal all the time. We all have like personal computers, we have iPhones, we have iWatches, like all the things, we're constantly connected. And it is difficult. And I definitely do think that plays into it, because it's kind of like we get that hit of dopamine, right? Like you see a notification go off, you have to check it right away. So it's going to be a practice of daily intentional activities to curb that, right? So we all know about mindfulness training, but how often do we actually do that, right? There's also apps and stuff that can like block your phone out for an hour. And I just recently, I don't know if anyone else had this, it started popping up now on my phone. If I have a meeting, it'll be like, would you like me to silence your calls? And so I think just utilizing, seeing where the technology has been built to kind of help pad us from that and really start utilizing it. And I wish that I had an easier answer of like, just wave a magic wand and you won't, right? But it's going to be these daily intentional activities to protect ourselves from that.
Alice, I have a question. What are things that managers could implement right now to make their workplaces healthier?
Probably like free snacks. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be different, right? Every workplace is different. And so it's kind of, it's a lot. I think like the true beginning of all of this is going to be connecting people and starting these conversations, right? So if everybody left this today and said, hey, I was just on this webinar and I was talking about burnout. Do you know anybody with burnout? What do you think's causing it? Is anybody here burnt out? So that's really like the birth of all of this is going to be from just starting the conversation. And boundaries. Yes, thank you, Kate. Boundaries, they're super hard. I mean, like we all struggle with this, not only at work, but I think like personally a lot. So look into like getting trained in assertiveness, and like read like Google it, like learn something about it and try to start implementing it. Managers could take a look at meetings. Yes, there's also a ton of research on like how many hours we waste in meetings that aren't necessary. I think that would definitely be a good place to start. Yeah, and talking about burnout, I mean, I think the more of us that are sharing our stories of actually what happened, right? Because if we look at something like unfair workload, it's kind of hard to really feel that, right? But if somebody comes to you and said, yeah, like I have X amount of projects in this many days, it makes it more real. And it also makes it something that we could start to pull apart and figure out how to manage it.
Ooh, we're getting some good book recommendations in the chat.
Yes.
Love this. Boundaries for Leaders. I want to get a copy of that one.
I'm not offering any value in this meeting, so I'm going to leave. Yes. Right. But like, these are amazing. Yes. And that's the thing, having a senior team member do it, I think is most important, because I think so often we look to the people around us to kind of see what's normal, right? To take a temperature of the culture. Is this okay? Will it impact me? And if nobody's saying that, then you kind of have everybody just accept things the way they are. So finding leaders within the organization who are really committed to setting those boundaries and setting them for their team.
I think too, at least in the US, there's this idea of virtue of working a ton, and changing that, like flipping that on its head and saying, we don't have to work 40 hours a week. That 40 hours is kind of arbitrary. I have a manager who's like, yeah, take a walk during your billable hours, during your working hours. We don't want you to kill yourself at this job. It means a lot.
Yeah, and I actually just read before I logged on here that California was looking at making full-time weeks like 32 hours, making a true 4-day work week. But there's not enough time for them to pass it this time around, so they're not going to do it. And a lot of the comments I was seeing on there were like, oh, if businesses are going to start leaving California because they're going to have to pay all this overtime money. But I think what's important to really, if you really look at the data and the research that's been done, all of these tools that are going to help people move out of burnout, if we have leaders really looking at the health of your organization, not just by the profit you bring in, but the health of the people that work there. Once we get back to a place where we're not 50% burnt out, these tools are actually going to help people flourish. So my background's in positive psychology, which is the study of optimal human functioning. And so what we're going to see is, if we actually can get some of these things implemented, is that we're not only going to prevent people from missing time out of work or having high anxiety, but we're going to see people who can be more creative, who can be more impactful, who can just, can do more and give more to their organizations, and it will all be better off. Another interesting thing that's come up recently in the world of work is putting salaries on job descriptions. Okay, I can't believe that this is even something we talk about, right? Like, it should be so obvious. And what's really cool, if you think about it, if that is more transparent, right? And we can see what salaries are at different jobs, it allows individuals to choose occupations or roles that are actually more meaningful to them. So not only are we taking like the anxiety and like that whole salary game out of the equation, but you're going to allow people to self-select into roles that are most meaningful and impactful to them. So steps forward. I feel like it's going to be like a penguining toward toward more healthy workplaces.
I think just good HR practices, like that's a really great step. Having an equitable, healthy workplace. I want to make sure people know that they can get a free focus account to make incremental steps towards their long-term goals. Maybe one of your goals is improving the health of your workplace.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Anne. So yes, I'm the founder of UX Design. That's kind of a play on user experience. I'm all about the human experience of work. So if you want to help and support redesigning your workplace, that's what I do. If you are interested, but maybe want to find somebody more local, I have a very wide network. So if you're at all interested in this or just want some more information, please reach out to me. I can help you, and I can help connect you to somebody else. And also starting in 2 weeks, I have a flourishing skills group, and it's particularly to support people who are moving out of burnout. So if you know anybody who is kind of in that phase right now, it's a 10-week program. We meet once a week, and we put the tools of positive psychology into practice. So just a really great way to connect with other people and help move you to more wellness.
Incredible. Alice, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Duncan.